Welcome to Dream Machine. My name is Aaron.
And my name is Patricia.
Patricia, I gotta be honest with you, I don't think this is gonna be the longest of episodes. To be quite honest
No,
with you.
not really. I mean, to be quite honest, I think that with Shrek 1 and Shrek 2, yes. Shrek the Third, I mean, we were talking about how disappointing it was, but I think that for the final chapter of this franchise, I don't think that there's really much to say.
Yeah, with Shrek the Third, like, you could tell the car was running out of gas, and it was going to shudder to a clunking halt. And, ladies and gentlemen, well, I guess we're going to talk about the car that's currently on the roadside gathering rust, I think,
Yes.
for this one. So, let's get this over with, shall we? So Shrek Forever After, also known as Shrek the Final Chapter or Shrek 4, is a 2010 American 3D animated comedy film and is the fourth installment in the Shrek series produced by DreamWorks Animation. The film premiered on April 21st of 2010 at the Tribeca Film Festival and was released by Paramount Pictures on May 21st of 2010 in the United States. It was also released in 3D and also came out in IMAX 3D format as well. Well, I tell you what, you can add as much 3D and put it and make it as big and as huge as possible for me, but as far as I'm concerned, this one was boring.
You know what? For as much as we kind of like dismiss Shrek the Third, at least it had a somewhat unique premise. But this one, it was copying off It's a Wonderful Life. And you can tell that they were really running out of ideas.
Exactly. And I tell you what, actually, well, I would say it kind of divided away from It's a Wonderful Life, and I think in probably the worst ways. I think, and so so the film goes is that Shrek and Donkey and Princess Fiona were going to be having this kind of birthday, I think, for Shrek.
Yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah, it was their kid's birthday, their kid's first birthday.
I see. So it's his kid's birthday party, and then Shrek gets a bit overstressed out over the whole thing and starts, taking shots at everybody, and then just walks away, saying that, oh, he wish he'd never had this situation, and so
now let me ask you something. Now, I think that this was a lost opportunity. I think that this film should have focused on Fiona. Now, here's a reason why. You see, I think that, if this was going to be the final film in the franchise, I mean, we've already seen what Shrek has been going through so many times. We've already seen him from, a lonely ogre in a swamp to being a married man, and then eventually the struggles of him being a father. I think it would have been a great idea to focus on Fiona because, she pretty much just gave up everything that she had in order for her to live in a swamp and become a mother to an ogre. And this movie had witches. Now think about it. Shrek Forever After tried to, make Fiona into a much more stronger character. And I think that it would have been, instead of having Rumpelstiltskin as the villain, I think it should have been the witch who cast a spell on her. Maybe Fiona was like feeling kind of like stressed out of living the same thing over and over again. And maybe it's like, what would have happened if she never met Shrek? What would have happened if she would have been rescued by Prince Charming instead? And, she would have lived off her life in far, far away.
Yeah.
And then maybe Shrek would have try to go after her saying like, oh, we're meant to be. And then, Fiona's like, what are you talking about? I don't know who you are, ogre. I think that if they would have tweaked this up a little bit, I think it would have been a lot more interesting.
Yeah, and I just think, so I'll give everyone basically the bottom line of the story. Shrek goes off in a huff. Rumpelstiltskin hits the scene and says, oh, okay, I can give you whatever you want, except I want something I want one day out of your life. And he goes, okay, signs a contract, and the one day that Rumpelstiltskin decides to take is the day that Shrek was born. And
yes.
so Shrek basically goes through this world, going through people, not realizing who he is, and basically that's just the theme throughout the entire film, that he just doesn't exist and no one knows who he is. And that, but mind you, it's like, why would he even through that logic, why on earth would he exist in this world anyway? Why wouldn't he just disappear into the ether? Like,
yeah, I mean, if he wouldn't disappear into the ether, then yeah, I think that a movie without Shrek and then focusing on the other characters, I don't think it would have been just as strong,
Yeah, it should have just been like, oh, I'm gonna take the day you were born. Okay, hey, now you're a rock star. You know, it's like that. Roll credits. Like, you know, it's just, that should have been the end of the Shrek series. Like, you know, imagine that, like, the most anticlimactic end to the Shrek character. Like, he just goes and just disappears. You know?
Yeah, and a lot of people will be like really confused, and they'll probably ask for their money back.
It'd be like the original ending to what's that dodgeball movie? The one
I think Dodgeball.
Dodgeball. Yeah, so I mean, it's called Dodgeball. So yeah, like you know, the original ending of that film was supposed to be that Ben Stiller was supposed to like eliminate what's his name? He not like his foot was actually go over the line. He'd like literally just like hit him, and he'd win the dodgeball competition, and they'd all just walk away, and the credits would roll, and that would be the end of the film. Like, imagine if that was that situation in Shrek 3. Probably be even funnier and probably more interesting than anything else that we've got. So,
so I actually have to ask a question about this. So Rumpelstiltskin is the main villain of this movie.
Yeah.
Which, okay, fair enough. So basically, from the beginning of the movie, so we have the king and queen going over to Rumpelstiltskin so that they can save Fiona from the dragon's keep. And I'm asking, where's the fairy godmother in all of this? If she finds out that, the king and queen are going behind her back and that, they're going over to somebody else to save Fiona, it's like, what would happen to the fairy godmother? And she never shows up anywhere in this film.
Maybe Rumpelstiltskin dealt with her too. Maybe, I don't know. Like,
what kind of powers that Rumpelstiltskin would deal with the fairy godmother? The fairy godmother is the most powerful creature in all of Far, Far Away.
He does have he did manage to take Shrek's day by signing a contract. So it's
but would the fairy godmother be fooled by signing a contract?
I don't know. Like, it's just a lot of things in this film don't make any sense. On top of that as well, you would think Lord Farquaad was still around now, given that.
Yeah, exactly. I was just about to say that. Like, where's Lord Farquaad in all of this? It's like, so Rumpelstiltskin pretty much took down Lord Farquaad, Prince Charming, and the fairy godmother. Something's not right here.
Yeah, like, I was expecting when they were going to do this, it was like, oh wow, I mean, it's going to mean like everything that Shrek has put his hands on is going to be exactly the way it is. Princess Fiona is still going to be in the tower. Lord Farquaad's still going to be the Lord of Duloc and still looking for a princess. Like, I thought when he signed that deal, I literally thought it was going to be, I think they tell him that it was the day that he took was the day that he was born. I thought, okay, then they're going to reset basically what's going on, and he's going to go through this again as a complete stranger, maybe.
Yeah,
that was the least I was hoping for, and we didn't even get that.
Yeah, and there's another reason why, because once again, very similar to Shrek the Third, they switched writers, and they switched writers with people who had never even known about the Shrek series. So there's a good start.
Yeah, that's it's just right behind the scenes, you could tell this film was confused about all it. It's kind of like it hit its head in amnesia, and like it was just like, oh, okay, what's going on? Like, it's like,
and the head writer of this, and the head writer of Shrek Forever After, I believe, was the same guy who voiced as Rumpelstiltskin.
Yeah, you just can't. I mean, it made sense for like, what's his name? Was it Brad Bird who voiced as Edmund Mode?
Brad Bird.
Yeah, it was Brad Bird. Yeah, so it was Brad Bird as Edmund Mode. So it's kind of like, I have no further comment on that really. But I mean, it's just even I was hoping that the ogres were going to be interesting in some way, but no, they're just kind of like clones of each other. Pretty much. You have the tough ogre, you have the tough female ogre, you have the chef, and that's pretty much it. See, there's not really much of a buildup of different characters. I mean, it is interesting that, hey, we get to see other ogres. It's like, where have they been? Nobody knows. Yeah, and it's not explained. No one's explaining this to me. It's like, I would have said oh, hey, Princess Fiona rescued herself and then found it was like maybe Shrek, if he never existed, maybe there would have been other ogres that would have come in, and maybe that would have had a change in the timeline where they would now be like, instead of like one Shrek, there would have been like a dozen Shreks, if you will, like just this huge army of ogres, maybe. And
and also I need to talk about the Fiona thing. So if Rumpelstiltskin knew that Fiona was trapped in the tower and that, she was waiting for her true love or whatever, then why didn't Rumpelstiltskin rescue her and then married Fiona?
Well, he didn't travel back in time himself, did he? I mean, like,
No, I mean he
just
changed everything.
he changed
Yeah,
everything.
but
Yeah.
I mean it was essentially an alternative timeline where Shrek never existed. So more or less things would have happened the same way. So when you know that would have been like the first thing I would have done if I knew that somebody was going to rescue Fiona from the Dragon's Keep, whether it been Lord Farquaad, would have been Prince Charming, then yeah, Rumpelstiltskin should have rescued Fiona and then maybe tricked her and saying like, "Oh, you know, I'm your rescuer. I get to take over far, far away." And then, Shrek would have like, had to go through another obstacle, but no, apparently not. We need to have Fiona, being the leader of this like, ogre army where they're trying to take down Rumpelstiltskin. And then Rumpelstiltskin kind of like was defeated because of this ogre army when he should have like gone to Fiona in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we get the thing where Fiona, they say that I mean there's this whole bit where she's kind of weird, which is kind of like, Shrek surrenders himself to like free like all ogres, but then Rumpelstiltskin says again, oh, I'm not letting go of Fiona because she's only an ogre by night and not by day. So obviously she changes back and stuff, and yeah, it's and then we get like all the craziness with like isn't there like a scene where Shrek flies on a broom and like he's like
yeah. So there's that one scene in which that when Shrek first meets up with Rumpelstiltskin after he's the leader of Far Far Away, and he's being captured and saying like as long when this day goes away, you will no longer exist. And so Shrek frees himself from the witches because apparently there are witches in this movie that are the lackeys of Rumpelstiltskin. And so, he frees himself and then he takes a broom and he flies away and he rescues Donkey, and Donkey doesn't even remember him.
So why are the witches sided with Rumpelstiltskin again?
I have no idea because the witches they have power. They can do magic, and I know that Rumpelstiltskin kind of like is degrading them, and he threatens them with water like in Wizard of Oz. I get that, but they're so much more powerful than Rumpelstiltskin. And then when he hires the Pied Piper, who, believe it or not, is the one who plays the music and as the Pied Piper is the son of William Steig, the original writer for the Shrek book.
Yeah.
And even he's more powerful than Rumpelstiltskin because he can control the witches, he can control the ogres, he can control anything with his flute. It's like, why isn't he the most powerful one in the bunch? I don't get it.
I know. It's like, wouldn't you imagine there'd be a lot of backstabbing currently going on here for, power over, far, far away? I mean, that would have been an interesting factor as well. Like, Rumpelstiltskin puts himself in that place, but then all the villains start to question, why on earth is he there? Like,
yeah, and that was very close to it too, because you remember the scene in which when Rumpelstiltskin gives the deal of a lifetime or something to capture Shrek. Why didn't anybody, like, when they capture Shrek, it's like, oh, I'm going to get the deal of a lifetime, a wish with no strings attached. Well, I'm going to be the ruler of Far, Far Away. Yeah. There you go. You're no longer having any powers.
Why the hell would anyone believe him? Like, he's the guy who, I mean, maybe they're probably not aware of that, but I'm sure they must be aware that he's the guy who signs dodgy deals to people, and they must be aware, like, oh, I'm going to send you a deal of lifetime. It's like, yeah, we've seen you do deals before, and we don't want anything to do with you, because we know everything you do is really, we know that you stick everything in the fine print.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. So, like, why the hell would anyone believe him to begin with? Like, it's a confused story, pretty much, and there's so many plot holes that you could fall into in this. So, like, they try and explain something like a concept here, and it's just kind of like, well, you don't need to do this. Well, why not do this? Why not do that? Why not do it? Like, it's kind of like, when you're given like a multiple choice, and you have option A, and then option B, C, D, E, F, and G are also just as applicable as that option. That's this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's kind of really confusing too. I mean, like, Shrek used to have like cohesive stories with tight comedy and a mixture of drama as well, but here none of it seems to like pull itself together. It tries to tell this like boring story with these boring characters. And, Shrek is supposed to apparently learn a lesson about, like, everything that he had was perfect. And, he threw everything away, and then he's trying to fight his way back into getting his life together. It's like, if Shrek really was like really unhappy with his life, I don't think he deserved getting it back, because I mean, it's like what Fiona said, after he did his cake smashing at the birthday party, that, he has a wife who loves him, friends who adore him, everybody, worships him like a celebrity. It's like, why can't he see that he has a great life? And yeah, like, and Shrek from the first movie would have been a lot more appreciative with Shrek with his life now. It's like all he had was like everybody hating on him living in a swamp by himself with no friends. It's like, I think that Shrek, if it was, like written better, I think that there wouldn't even be an issue with that. I would have liked to have seen Fiona go through the same thing, because, she was meant to be the ruler of Far, Far Away. She was trapped in a tower half her life, and then she gave up everything so that she can be able to become a wife and a mother to an ogre. So I think that it would have been a lot more interesting if Fiona would have been focused more instead of Shrek. And it's kind of like with The Incredibles 2, in which we focused on Elastigirl, and then, Mr. Incredible was taking care of his kids. It's like, why couldn't we have that? Why couldn't Fiona go through a similar struggle? And then maybe Shrek is trying to like convince her to say, hey, you were my wife and you had 3 kids and all that stuff. It's like, and then she's like, oh, I have a, my life is happy. I'm the ruler of Far, Far Away, and I have a loving husband, either with Prince Charming or Lord Farquaad or Rumpelstiltskin. I don't know, but I think that this could have been a lot better.
Yeah. Is it just me? I mean, going towards obviously we cover the story. It is just not interesting at all, pretty much. But going to the cast of characters, I mean, obviously you got the typical ones there. You got Mike Myers, you got Eddie Murphy, you got Cameron Diaz, you got Antonio Banderas, and but mind you, none of the other names, like obviously Julie Andrews and John Cleese come back, obviously for their characters too.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, you look at all the other ones, like you got Kathy Griffin, Larry King, Ryan Seacrest. Like, you could tell pretty much at this point, like, any other celebrity didn't want to have anything else to do with the Shrek franchise.
Yeah, point. And then you have John Hamm and Jane Lynch in there. And this was like when they were like really popular. John Hamm was in Mad Men, Jane Lynch was in Glee. So this was like when they were like really popular amongst like, television stars. And even they don't really have that much to work with.
You think they should have been a TV movie rather than a theatrical release?
Yeah, and we did talk about this in Shrek the Third, that there were supposed to be 5 Shrek movies. And apparently, like, even though that they wanted to do the 5th Shrek movie where it was a prequel, they decided that they were going to make this as the final one. And it was apparently supposed to be like a look back into the entire series. It was supposed to be like a movie that was a celebration of itself. Kind of like a way to end things off. But instead of like taking a huge step forward, they decided to take a huge step backwards. Wow. And they decided to just like celebrate itself as opposed to like have this big epic grand finale to kind of like close the series off.
Yeah. At this point, I think I would have preferred a film that kind of like brought all the villains back. Unlike then Shrek had like this massive mammoth task of like taking on all these villains. I know we already had that with Shrek the Third, like all the villains ganging together and obviously taking Far, Far Away by storm. But I don't know, like I think if every Shrek any movie sequel for that matter should up the ante of its original film, and Shrek Forever After just doesn't do that at all.
Right. Yeah, and it's a debate. Like, which one is the worst one, Shrek the Third or Shrek the Final Chapter?
At least Shrek the Third had somewhat of an interesting concept. This doesn't. For me, this to me just doesn't. I had an easier time sitting through Shrek the Third than I'd have sitting through Shrek the Final Chapter.
Yeah, I guess you could. I guess so. I mean, yeah, Shrek the Third is not very good by any means whatsoever. No. But at least it had an interesting premise. At least it had the struggles of Shrek trying to be a good father, and I know that Prince Charming wasn't that great, but at least he tried to attempt of gathering up all the villains together. That was pretty cool. And Fiona and the other princesses trying to fight off with the villains, and trying to showcase girl power. That was pretty neat. And at least with, King Arthur, I mean, yeah, his story was pretty boring and the character was superfluous, but at least they were going somewhere with it. But this one, doesn't really do it much of anything. Like, I don't really, I mean, like, if you look at it for like 5 seconds, Rumpelstiltskin is not a very threatening villain because he's surrounded by everyone else who's better than him. And, we have Shrek, who's kind of like unappreciative with his life. And he goes on a rampage saying like, oh, my life was so much better without you and without the kids. I wanted to be alone. And I want to scare off people like I used to. And then, when everything is taken away, then he wants to fight back for it. And, the other characters are just not very interesting. Like the other ogres, they're one dimensional, and it's kind of like a letdown,
Yeah. And you look at, I just look at the poster on there, and you look at that and you think, yeah, there's going to be like a massive, massive scrap in this, and like a massive fight, and it's just nothing,
Yeah, there's just really nothing to say about this. I mean, even the ending where Shrek tells Fiona, do you remember when I saved you from the dragon's keep? And she's like, yeah, and then then he was like, no, it was you who rescued me, which that's very nice and all, but it kind of is very hollow.
Yeah, it's kind of like, no, you rescued her from the dragon. Like, just like, if you saw... This is the thing, do you think this was also made for people, like, who never saw the original movie? Like, do you think this was there not to kind of, like, entertain the Shrek faithful? I think it was more just kind of like that to kind of get people to say, oh, hey, it's a Shrek film, and if you've never seen Shrek, then here's what we think you think it should be.
I don't know. Like, first of all, if they see this movie, they're like, oh, Shrek and Fiona. It's like, oh, you have these ogre couples and then you have the babies. It's like, oh, you have to see the first film and then you have to see the third film. And I don't know. It's very difficult because you remember how we talked about in Cars 3 about how that was a poor example of, trying to introduce a fan base who had never seen Cars 1 or 2 into the series. It's like, I guess maybe if you've never seen any of the other Shrek films, then maybe you can kind of like squeeze your way into this. But why would you see this as your first Shrek film?
Yeah. So, that was pretty much that. And here's the thing about this. They're not even sure... Here's the thing. They've only got the budget for this film down as $135 to $165 million. So they're not even sure how much money they actually spent on this thing.
That's kind of weird. Now, I can understand for Ants because it was their first movie, and there's a bit of a debate on how much money they spent on it, but this is like, what, their 20-something film, and they don't even know how much money they spent on it?
Yeah.
That's weird.
Here's the thing about this, and this actually saddens me to a degree. The film made $752 million at the box office.
I mean, I can understand why, because this film was marketed as the final Shrek film. And I remember that there was like a lot of commercials hyping up Princess Fiona as like a tough, warrior, and Shrek trying to get his life back together. So there was a lot of marketing, like really hyping up this movie. And the fact that it was the final movie, it's like, oh, if it's a final movie for any film that you grew up with, then yeah, you would definitely see it. Like Toy Story 3. At the time, we thought that was the final film in the Toy Story trilogy, and there was a lot of hype for it. And in fact, didn't this movie come out at the same time around Toy Story 3?
Yeah.
2010?
And it's like but mind you, there's gonna mind you, I'm gonna say this at the very. I keep saying I'm gonna say this at the very end of DreamMachine, but there is a thing I'd like to say that I think would be very telling between DreamWorks and Pixar. But I mean, the fact that Shrek Forever After, the fact that we've got to this point. And if the third film wasn't wanting enough that the story just was running out of gas. I mean, I really hope all those people that paid that ticket money and walked into that film and then walked out of it and saying, yeah, if they're saying that's the final chapter, that should be the final chapter, period. That should just be it. No more Shrek films after that.
Yeah, and now there's talks about another one. They're talking about a Shrek reboot.
Oh, of course. I mean, well, why not? Like, if people came in and spent about $700 million on it, and you pretty much it made nearly 8 times its budget, like, of course you're gonna talk about making another Shrek film. So it's unfortunately this is a situation where I feel like, unfortunately, and keep this in mind, I never actually saw Shrek Forever After until fairly recently. Like, it's one of those Shrek films where it's kind of like I was gritting my teeth and saying, I'd buy that for $1. Like, I haven't actually seen the full Shrek film because I knew after Shrek the Third I was done with Shrek. And I didn't want to see any further films with that. And when they announced Shrek Forever After, I was kind of like, well, you can call it the final chapter all you like. I feel like the final chapter was Shrek the Third because it was running out of steam pretty quickly.
Yeah, I did know somebody who actually did see this movie in theaters, and they were telling me their experiences. Like, oh, it sucked. Like, half of the theater was filled and nobody laughed. Yeah. And I was like, wow, that's really hard because I remember I even mentioned this in the Shrek Dream Machine episode that I went to see Shrek 4 times. And all those 4 times that I did see that movie, everybody was laughing, everybody had a good time, and the seats were filled. So the fact that we went to that point, in which half of the seats were filled and nobody was laughing, it's like that is how low that the series has gotten.
Yeah, it's just imagine how worse it would be if they filled that movie theater to the rafters and no one was laughing. Imagine how depressing that was. I mean, it must have been. How much a depressing theater that must have been. And everyone walked out saying like, oh, wow, like we wasted what? We paid overpriced popcorn and overpriced candy and sat through basically a bunch of nothing. Like, and I know that's going to be a lot of people's movie experiences, given how, how bad standards movies have got recently. But, I mean, it's like, I would say, for people like that, like, the fact that you kind of advertise it as the final chapter, like this is going to be the final film, and that for the final film you're going to want to like pull out every single possible stop you potentially could, and it ended up being kind of like this flat, just quagmire of just, wanting to just get through it and then get over it. Like, it's
yeah, it makes a lot of sense because How to Train Your Dragon was a bit of a success. Madagascar already had Madagascar 2, and then they were working on Kung Fu Panda 2. So it's like, let's just get this out of the way and let's focus on our other movies to make them franchises.
Well, I'm talking about it from the cinema goer's perspective. Like that must have been terrible for them to just go through that and spend all that money and not really get anything out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, imagine, somebody like me who had loved the first Shrek film and then who really loved the second one. And then you see the third one, it's like, oh, it was a bit of a disappointment, but hey, they're hyping up the final chapter. Like, this is supposed to be huge and the commercials make it out to be epic. And then when you watch it, it's nothing. It's a bit of a massive letdown.
And I've got to be honest with everybody, I do know how that feels because I'm ashamed to admit this, I did see Transformers 3.
Oh, man.
I was dragged there unwillingly by my friends. I sat there, and I actually ranted to myself as I walked home.
Yeah, but you weren't expecting Transformers to be good, right?
No. Well, at least I was expecting it to be something,
Yeah, but imagine that, you went to see a film and you were really excited about it. Imagine if Toy Story 3 was a massive disappointment.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been another Toy Story film in a long time. Similar to Shrek, there hasn't been a Shrek film in like 3 years. So, hey, maybe they're working really hard to making this like the biggest thing that they could have done. And instead it just turned out to be a flat story with boring characters, and you just no comedy, no drama. Everything just seems forced. It's like, imagine being let down by that. And I can imagine that for people who grew up with Shrek, and Shrek's been around since like 2001, so that was like 9 years later. Imagine like 9 years of being dedicated to a franchise and then eventually just scene of how it ended, at least for now, because we'll be talking about Puss in Boots later. Yeah. And then, so imagine seeing this and then it's like, oh, this is a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah. So, sadly, everybody, the final Shrek does not end on a roar, it ends on a whimper. So,
yeah. And if you do like Shrek, Forever After, that's fine. But, if you see the first 2 films, then you would understand about why Shrek for the final chapter feels a bit of a letdown.
Yeah. So that ends another episode of Dream Machine. And so what do we got coming up next?
Anyway, so yeah, so we talked about How to Train Your Dragon and we liked it. We talked about Shrek Forever After and we liked it. So yes, coming up next, we are going to be talking about Megamind.
Cool. So with me, Aaron.
And Patricia.
Take care, and bye for now.
See you later.
Shrek is love, Shrek is life.
You had to end it there.
Yeah, and I hope that ends there.
Me too.